Hola mis amigos y bienvenidos a una lección sobre el pretérito y el imperfecto. Finally, we are going to talk about this really important concept in Spanish, which is the difference between the preterite and the imperfect, the two past tenses that you now know. So in order to dive into this, let's look at the past in general in Spanish. We have the past tense, el pasado, the idea of speaking in the past. But something that is special about Spanish is that we have more than one tense for speaking in the past. And that's different from what you're used to if you're a native speaker of English, where we really just have one past tense. So you started out by learning the pretérito a while back in Spanish 102, and you recently learned the imperfecto, which is another past tense. So hopefully you're pretty clear at this point on how to conjugate in these tenses. I'll do a quick little review before moving on. But most of this video is going to focus on when to use preterite and when to use imperfect, which is a big concept in Spanish, as I've said, and it's something that grows over time with a lot of experience and practice. So if it doesn't feel super clear at the end of watching this, that's probably perfectly okay. So a quick review, do you remember the pretérito endings? For AR verbs, they're hasta, o, amos, aron. Maybe you remember that little jingle that I gave you in 102. I came up with that in order to help you to remember where the accent marks go. So in that little in that jingle, I say them twice if they get an accent mark. Hasta, o ambos aron. And I leave out hasta since I don't focus a lot on the vosotros form, but you are welcome to learn it if you're interested in traveling to Spain. Bien, for the ER and IR verbs in pretérito, we have iste, o, pusieron. So again, the accent marks are really important there in the yo form, and again in the él, ella, usted form. Note that the accent mark is over the O, not over the I. Iste, o, pusieron. Bien? So sounds a little bit like a dying pig, but when it gets stuck in your head, it can really help you to remember those pretérito endings. Oh, and also, little note at the bottom, también hay muchos irregulares. Don't you love how I just slide that in there? There are a lot of irregulars in the pretérito, and they don't follow the rules, and they don't have accent marks, and we spent a good bit of time earlier in the semester on those, so that's something that you can continue working with and polishing as you go. Bien, as far as the imperfecto endings, hopefully you remember those because we've learned them very recently. For AR verbs, the imperfecto endings are ava, avas, ava, avamos con acento. There's an accent on that nosotros form. And then avais, avan. For ER and IR verbs, we have ia, ias, ia, iamos, iais, ian. So for all of those, you drop the AR, ER, or IR, and then stick on that imperfecto ending. And a little note here that really is an authentic little note. Just keep in mind there are three irregulars in the imperfecto: sed, id, and bed. But otherwise, the imperfecto is actually a very perfect tense. It doesn't have many irregulars at all, which is great. Bien. So hopefully that's all stuff that is at least familiar from the past because it is content that we've studied. And now we're going to move on and talk a little more about when to select each tense. So the pretérito. The pretérito expresses specific completed actions. So I abbreviate that with SCA. When I was in high school, I was in the SCA, the Student Council Association. This is different. This is talking about specific completed actions. These are actions or events completed in the past or actions completed at a specific point in time. So it's just stuff that happened and it's over. Juana fue al centro. Los estudiantes vinieron a clase. So Juana went downtown. The students came to class. It's specific, it's complete, and it's over. Pretérito can be used for action that interrupted something ongoing. Yo hacía mi tarea cuando Juan me llamó. Okay? I was doing my homework when Juan called me. Boom. That interruption is in pretérito. Elisa conducía cuando tuvo un problema con el coche. Elisa was driving when she had Boom, interrupted action, a problem with the car. Being, if sometimes I like to kind of draw what's happening in a creative way in the past in Spanish to help people with these tenses. And with pretérito, I always make a big X. Sometimes I stomp my foot or I hit the desk to show that it is a specific completed action. Boom, it happened and it's over. Bueno, so moving on to what the imperfecto expresses, there are several things that I'm going to show you here. So we're going to start with the first C of an acronym we're going to learn. And the first C here is continuous action. So continuous action is stuff that means was or were plus ing, like I was talking, they were writing, were used to. Those are both really good translations of imperfecto. For example, yo jugaba afuera cuando era niña. I used to play outside when I was a girl. Both of those verbs are in imperfecto. For some reason, I only underlined one, but they both are imperfecto because they're talking about what used to happen in the past. The next piece of our imperfecto acronym is the H for habitual action. Anything that happened more than once is habitual. Íbamos a la playa cada verano. That's the imperfect of id. We used to go to the beach every summer. Habitual action. Endless action. This is a really important one. We use it when we're setting the scene, like when we're starting to tell a story, we're setting things up and describing what it was like. Hacía sol. Hacía is the imperfect version of hace. Like in the present we say hace sol, but in the imperfecto, hacía sol. Era una noche triste. It was sunny. It was a sad night. Bien, descriptions in the past like that, setting the scene, are in the imperfecto. Age in the past is always imperfect. Cuando yo tenía 4 años. When I had 4 years. That's how we express when I was 4 years old. Age in the past, imperfect. T, time on a clock. When we tell time in the past, we use the imperfect. So this same sentence in the present would be son las 6. You're probably familiar with that. But when you say it was 6 o'clock, son goes to imperfecto. That's why it's eran las 6. It was 6 o'clock when, and that's also kind of like setting the scene as well. But we use imperfecto for time on a clock. Emotions and mental states. This is a big part of imperfect. Emotions and mental states are not specific completed actions like pretérito. They're more ongoing. Estaba triste. I was sad, worried. Esperaba ir. I was hoping to go, but remember that emotional and mental states take imperfecto. And then the last piece of this acronym, descriptions. Descriptions in the past should be imperfecto. Paco era alto. Paco was tall. La casa era grande. The house was big. Those things are things that are ongoing. Note the wavy line down here at the bottom. I think the wavy line is a perfect depiction of what the imperfecto is like. It's not something that just happened. Paco didn't just wake up tall one day. It's something ongoing. It's wavy. It's moving. It's imperfecto. So you notice that our acronym here spells cheated down the side. So you can use cheated to help you remember when to use the imperfecto when you're speaking in the past. Bien, let us then look at a few clue words. There are some things we can consider to help us along. Here's some clue words that are really common indicators that the pretérito should be used. Ayer, yesterday. El año pasado. El mes pasado. La semana pasada. Hace un año, una semana, a year ago, a week ago. Un día, de repente, suddenly. Entonces, luego, después. All of these words point to the pretérito. They really lend themselves toward things that are specific and completed and over. On the other hand, we have some clue words for imperfecto that point to things being wavier and ongoing or repeated. Muchas veces, cada día, todos los lunes. And then all the mentes, frecuentemente, raramente, usualmente. All of those point to something being repeated. Even something rare is repeated. De vez en cuando, a veces, mientras. Mientras is used a lot for simultaneous action, like one thing was happening while something else was happening. So that would be imperfecto. Vale, vamos a practicar. Let's put this knowledge to use a little bit. With this first little exercise, explain the reason for using each underlined tense in the story, then check your answers on the next slide. So I'd like you to read over this story. I have already underlined all the verbs for you. You don't have to conjugate or produce anything. I just want you to think about why each tense is used, where it is. So pause the presentation and take a few minutes to think through the justification for preterito and imperfecto. Keep in mind that a typical reason for preterito is SCA, specific completed action, and some of the typical reasons for imperfecto are from cheated, okay, like continuous action, habitual action, endless action, etc. So here you have some respuestas and explicaciones for the story. It starts with hacía and estaba in the imperfecto because those verbs are setting the scene and describing. Eran is in imperfecto because it's telling time on a clock. Llovía and hacía are imperfecto because they're setting the scene and describing. That tells what was happening. Apareció is pretérito. It's a specific completed action. Boom, all of a sudden it appeared. And then we have a series of events. Grité, busqué, vino. Those verbs are in the pretérito. They're specific completed actions, a series of events that are over. And you will notice, I'll go back, you will notice that often in a story, it starts out imperfecto by setting the scene and describing, and then moves to a series of actions in the pretérito. Boom, boom, boom. So you might want to keep that in mind for your own writing. Here's a little more practice for you. Now it's time for you to fill in some blanks. I'd like you to pause the presentation and take some time to think through these sentences. Watch for the clue words, for the guide words that help you to know whether you need the pretérito or the imperfecto. And then here are some answers for you. Era imperfecto because it's a description. Iba imperfecto because it's a repeated action. Viví, tres es pretérito because it's a specific completed action. An actual specific period of time is given. Cuatro hacía imperfecto, setting the scene. Cinco vio pretérito is a specific completed action. Boom, saw. And seis quería is imperfecto because wanting is an emotional mental state. She wanted to. Bien, so this is a big topic for us. Poco a poco se va lejos means little by little you go a long way. Bien, when I was a student studying in Spain, I was really thinking that I might want to be a Spanish teacher, but I wasn't sure. And I thought to myself, how will I ever explain the pretérito and the imperfecto to another human being? It's so complicated. I'm not even sure that I'm always getting it right myself. But as one of my great professors always said, if you look at enough of these examples, eventually the skill will become automatic for you. And I really didn't know what he was talking about, but I nodded and smiled and I did what he said, and he's absolutely right. We repeat ourselves in communication. So over time, you just start to see the same patterns and structures repeated, and then you know what to do. Okay, so muchas gracias. Let me know if you have questions y buena suerte.